I'm going to interrupt you there again because it's a simple question, really. I mean, the government says 90% of homes will be covered by the fibre to the home network. What percentage of homes have you calculated will only get 12 megabits per second, the low speed you're talking about?
Oh no, Tony, we aren't making any apology for not spending. We're not going to spend $43 billion and roll fibre out to every single house, whether they're going to make use of it or not.
No, but I'm simply talking about your scheme and whether you can actually tell us what percentage of homes would have this low speed.
No, well, that is a baseline that all homes have access to, and many will have access to much higher speeds. I've just told you, 2.5 million homes have access to higher speeds, and with that competition platform, we are going to ensure that there's competition across a range of technologies that will drive better broadband services, faster speeds and lower prices.
All right, Stephen Conroy, what's your baseline?
If I could just come in there. Tony refused to answer your question. How many homes are going to get what he describes as a baseline, which is a peak speed, not an actual speed? If you're standing in the laboratory underneath the tower at midnight on a Saturday using it by yourself, you might get his baseline speed. That's a peak speed. But there's a whole range of questions that Tony is continuing to refuse to answer. There is no available spectrum in metropolitan Australia for his network to be built in. There is none. It's being used. Just identify it, Tony. Name it. How many towers are you planning on building across metropolitan Australia? There are thousands of towers going to be needed. And towers have to be connected to fibre. So you're planning on building a range of towers, thousands of towers, and then running a piece of fibre right through the streets of metropolitan Australia, right up to a tower. And Tony, he keeps talking about, and Tony Abbott did it again tonight in Queensland, he keeps talking about this wonderful mobile network.
I'm losing touch with all the Tonys here.
They are building a fixed wireless network. You will not be able to pick your laptop up and go for a walk into your street and use a fixed line network.
Okay, well, let's put a couple
of simple questions are, how many towers, what spectrum?
Okay, if you don't mind, I'll ask the simple questions. But I'd like to get Tony Smith to respond to the issues that are being raised there.
Oh, well, look, I mean, let me deal with the spectrum issue first, if I might, Tony. I mean, Stephen would have you believe that there's no possibility of any spectrum for wireless services. Look, I just want to go through this very clearly for him. There is spectrum today that is suitable for wireless. It's in a number of bands, and there are existing players using that spectrum. We've made clear with our $2 billion wireless investments that those existing players are welcome, of course, to come forward, and they may well make a bid for one or both of those opportunities to use the spectrum to deliver those services. Over and above that, Tony, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, that spectrum is tradable. So they may well wish to trade it to another player who's able to use that spectrum to deliver the service. Just last week, Austar issued a media release talking about the spectrum they had, particularly in rural and regional Australia. No, you don't need to interrupt.
This is about metropolitan Australia.
No, you don't need to interrupt. And over and above that, there is new spectrum becoming available with the switchover from digital television.
Okay, well, that covers your answer to the spectrum thing. Let me ask you this, though. Isn't it true that the more people using wireless technology that use it, the slower the speeds? Isn't that a simple mathematical equation?
Well, wireless is contended, but the speeds and the technology is getting better all the time. And we are not only promising wireless, Tony. As I said, we are putting down that platform for a range of technologies to compete. And what you'll see is upgrades across all of those technologies, and they'll compete with each other. And that's the way it should be. That fibre backbone that we're putting down, 60 to 70,000 kilometres of fibre, creating a dual lane highway and breaking that bottleneck, unleashing competition, will see telecommunications companies able to go and deliver services in rural and regional parts of Australia particularly, where they haven't been able to before because of the price barriers.
Okay.
And you'll see a cycle of competition that will see fibre rolled out.
Sorry, I think we better go to Stephen Conroy, because I'd like just to raise... we are actually running out of time. Unfortunately, it always happens with these kind of debates, because
well,
there's
you keep interrupting.
There's so much detail to cover. But Stephen Conroy, the other benefits of the fibre optic network include this e-health program that you're talking about, and of course the smart grid technology. Can you, though, not do it with other forms of technology, internet technology, including wireless technology?
The e-health and the e-education applications require high-definition video conferencing. If you want to be able to, as I recently met a stroke victim who is going through rehabilitation after a stroke, and the new technology that we are providing allows that person to be in their own home, being monitored by two-way high-definition video while they engage in their rehabilitation exercises, being monitored in real time, live time, by their doctor or their health provider, rehabilitation health provider. And that sort of technology is required to support that level of e-service. The sort of consultations that Julia talked about on Monday in our campaign launch, where she talked about wanting to be able to talk with patients from your local GP without having to travel all those distances. You can't provide those sorts of services. Last week we talked to Betty, who was using a new device that is monitoring her vital signs. She's in her 80s and she's monitoring her vital signs, and she's got a video conference link with a nurse. She described it, and she'd only just gone on the National Broadband Network in Tasmania. She described it as a security blanket.
All right.
You can't deliver those sorts of services on Tony Abbott's network.
I'm going to have to go back to Tony Smith. We're nearly out of time, and I've got to ask you this. The network you're talking about, with its lower speeds and variable speeds, could it possibly do these kind of things? Could it carry a smart grid to a house? Could it actually work in the way that the fibre optic network is going to work?
Well, Graham Lynch, who is one of the most respected telecommunications commentators from ComsDay, made the point the day after we launched our policy that all of these sorts of things can easily be delivered on the sorts of platforms and the faster speeds we're talking about rolling out through competition. Now, the other point I'd make, Tony, is that I know we're nearly out of time.
True.
Well, Graham Lynch said it, so you're saying
rewriting. You are trying to rewrite the laws of physics, Tony.
No. Well, Stephen, I mean, you might like to interrupt, but if I could just answer the question, Graham Lynch said that. Now, if you want to argue with a respected commentator like Graham Lynch, you can, but I'd take his word over yours any day of the week. The other point, Tony, is with our backbone rollout, that $2.75 billion investment, we are connecting hospitals where they're not connected. And the sorts of examples that we've seen given, many are occurring today. Of course, with higher speeds, we see higher speeds being rolled out over a range of platforms. Wireless is the baseline, but I've mentioned the HFC network. That's delivering 100 megabits for those that want it in Melbourne. Optus has upgraded, or about to upgrade theirs, to 70 megabits. You'll see this cycle of higher speeds across all of those platforms over the next years. And, of course, Stephen's network's going to take 8 years to roll out in any event.
OK, well, Stephen Conroy is bursting for a final word. I'm going to give that to you, and then we're going to have to go.
Well, he's interrupted so many times, I don't know why.
70% of the funding in the profile that Tony Smith produced last week is spent after the year 2014. He still won't answer you how many people he is going to condemn to a wireless network that can't deliver the services that Australians are increasingly going to need and demand over the coming years. He's essentially decided he's going to build the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and he's going to only build it with 2 lanes. Tony Abbott's plan entrenches the digital divide. It takes millions of Australians and locks them in to a broadband world that is never going to move. OK,
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to call a halt to it there. We'll have to leave you both for tonight's debate. Stephen Conroy, Tony Smith, thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks very much.